The Fall and Exodus. The sky over Beijing turned black at precisely 9:47 a.m. local time on June 12, 2089, not from clouds or natural phenomena, but from the massive silhouettes of ships that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Within minutes, similar reports came in from New York, London, Moscow, Delhi, and every major population center on Earth. Admiral Helena Reyes stood in the United Nations Space Command headquarters beneath Mount Cheyenne, watching with growing horror as the global defense network lit up with alerts. At 53, she had devoted her life to defending Earth from exactly this scenario, but nothing in her training had prepared her for the scale of what was happening. "What are we looking at?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos of the command center. Colonel Marcus Chen, her second in command, looked up from his console with wide eyes. "Over 300 vessels, ma'am. Largest is approximately 5 kilometers in length. No known configuration matching any Earth design." Helena's throat tightened, and they just appeared. "Yes, ma'am. No warp signatures, no hyperspace ruptures. One moment our sensors read clear, the next, they were just there." First contact with an alien civilization, humanity's long-anticipated moment, had finally arrived. But there was no peaceful greeting, no diplomatic exchange. The visitors announced themselves with weapons fire. The first attacks targeted military installations. Shanghai's coastal defense grid vanished in blinding white light. The North American aerospace defense perimeter collapsed within minutes. Orbital defense platforms were systematically destroyed before they could even target the alien vessels. "They're jamming our communications," Chen reported. "Conventional weapons aren't penetrating their shields. Nuclear launch facilities worldwide report system failures." Helena slammed her fist on the command table. "Get me the president." President Amara Okafor's face appeared on the screen, her usually composed features now drawn with tension. "Admiral, please tell me you have options." "Madam President, I recommend immediate activation of the ARC protocol." A heavy silence fell between them. The ARC protocol was the ultimate contingency plan, developed in secret by a coalition of world governments after the discovery of potentially habitable exoplanets. 12 massive generation ships, hidden in underground facilities around the world, ready to carry the seeds of humanity to the stars if Earth ever faced extinction. No one had ever truly believed they would be needed. "You're certain?" the president asked quietly. A massive explosion rocked the command center. Dust fell from the ceiling as screens flickered. "They've penetrated Mount Cheyenne's outer defenses," Chen reported. "They'll reach the command level within 30 minutes. Helena met the president's gaze through the screen. "We have no choice. Either we escape or humanity ends today." President Okafor closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "ARC protocol authorized. Code Epsilon Omega 73. The command center transformed instantly as officers abandoned their defensive positions and began initiating the evacuation sequences. Across the globe, massive underground hangar doors began to open as the generation ships, each capable of sustaining 50,000 colonists, prepared for launch. "What do we know about these aliens?" Helena asked as she and Chen hurried toward the emergency shuttle. "The translation eye has decoded some of their communications," Chen replied, consulting his tablet. "They call themselves the Killari. From what we can tell, they see Earth as prime real estate. They don't want to negotiate. They'd want us gone. And they'll get their wish," Helena said grimly. "Just not the way they expected." While Earth's remaining military forces launched a desperate counterattack, not to win, but to buy time, the ARC ships began their loading sequences. Scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, teachers, people with skills critical for establishing a new human civilization, were the priority, along with a carefully selected genetic repository of plant and animal DNA. Helena oversaw the operation from the flagship, the Prometheus. As Earth's defense forces were systematically destroyed, millions of civilians tried to reach the ARC ships, unaware that the selection process had been determined years in advance. Security forces held back the desperate crowds as the chosen few were ushered aboard. "This is wrong," Chen said quietly as they watched the scenes unfold on the monitors. "We're leaving billions to die. We're saving what we can," Helena replied, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. "If we try to save everyone, no one survives." 72 hours after the Killari arrived, the last of Earth's organized military resistance collapsed. The alien forces began systematic operations to cleanse the planet of human life, using weapons that vaporized city blocks in seconds. In underground facilities around the world, massive engines roared to life as the Ark ships prepared for launch. The Prometheus was the last to depart, carrying Admiral Reyes, Colonel Chen, and the senior command staff who would guide humanity to its new home. As the ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, Helena watched on the view screens as the blue-green planet that had been humanity's cradle for hundreds of thousands of years grew smaller behind them. The Killari ships noticed them too late. The Ark fleet had already engaged their experimental FTL drives, disappearing into the depths of space. The journey to Novus Prime, a potentially habitable exoplanet orbiting Kepler-442, would take 87 years at maximum sustainable speed. Most of the colonists would make the journey in cryosleep, while rotating crews maintained the ships and the first generation of new children were born and raised in space. Helena would not live to see their new home. At her age, she knew she would die aboard the Prometheus, but she was determined that humanity would not. "Set course for Kepler-442, she ordered, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened. "And begin Operation Memory." Operation Memory was perhaps the most crucial aspect of the Ark protocol, ensuring that the survivors would never forget Earth, what had happened there, and most importantly, who was responsible. Every child born during the journey would learn about the Killari, about the fall of Earth, and about humanity's solemn vow to one day return and reclaim their homeworld. The years passed. Admiral Reyes died peacefully in her sleep 15 years into the journey. Colonel Chen, who had become Captain Chen of the Prometheus, lived another decade before succumbing to radiation-induced cancer. Leadership passed to the next generation, then the next. By the time the Ark fleet approached Novus Prime, no one aboard had ever set foot on Earth. But they all knew the stories, had all seen the recordings, had all pledged the same oath their parents and grandparents had taken. Remember Earth. Remember the enemy. Return stronger. Novus Prime proved habitable, though challenging. Higher gravity, lower oxygen levels, and aggressive native fauna made establishing the first colony difficult. 20,000 colonists died in the first 5 years from disease, accidents, and attacks by indigenous predators. But humans, as they always had, adapted. They built settlements in the more temperate regions. They genetically modified Earth crops to thrive in the alien soil. They developed new technologies to compensate for the harsher environment. And always, they remembered Earth. In a building at the center of New Haven, the largest human settlement on Novus Prime, stood the Hall of Remembrance. Here, holographic displays showed images of Earth, its cities, wilderness, people, and culture. Children would visit on school trips, placing their hands on interactive panels that simulated the feel of Earth's grass, the splash of its oceans, the texture of its trees, and in a special chamber accessible only to adults stood the war room. Here, generation after generation of military planners studied what little they knew about Killari technology, developed theoretical countermeasures, and planned for the day humanity would return to the stars not as refugees, but as conquerors. One day, the colonists promised each other, "We will go home." And so the first century on Novus Prime passed as humanity rebuilt itself, stronger and more determined than ever before, but always with their gaze turned toward the stars, toward the distant sun that still warmed the Earth they had lost. The return. Commander Ileana Reyes stood at the observation deck of the UES Vengeance, staring at the holographic display of Earth. 217 years had passed since her ancestral namesake, Admiral Helena Reyes, had led the exodus from humanity's homeworld. Now, Eliana would lead the return. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Admiral Takashi Chen, joining her at the viewport. Like Eliana, he carried the name of his ancestor who had made the great journey. "I studied Earth my entire life," Eliana replied. "Seen every recording, read every account. But seeing it now, even from this distance," she trailed off, unable to put the emotion into words. The Vengeance was the flagship of the Liberation Fleet, 15 warships built in secret over the past century in the asteroid belt of the Novus Prime system. Unlike the desperate evacuation ships of generations past, these vessels were designed for one purpose: war. "Status report," Eliana requested as they walked to the command center. "All ships report ready," Takashi replied. "The stealth systems are functioning at optimal capacity. As far as we can tell, the Kelari have no idea we're here." In the 2 centuries since the fall of Earth, humanity had flourished on Novus Prime. The harsh environment had forced rapid adaptation and technological advancement. The Materials Science Division had developed new alloys stronger than anything known on pre-fall Earth. The Physics Division had refined FTL travel and created shield technology that theoretical models suggested would withstand Kelari weapons. Most importantly, the Research Division had cracked the secret of the Kelari's sudden appearance over Earth that fateful day. They used quantum tunneling technology that allowed their ships to essentially teleport across vast distances without traditional warp signatures. Now humanity had not only replicated that technology but improved upon it. The scout ships report minimal Kelari presence in Earth orbit, Commander Zuria Okafor reported. Another descendant of Earth's final leaders, Zuria commanded the Intelligence Division. Surface scans show they've transformed approximately 30% of the landmass for their own habitation. The remaining areas appear to be in various states of wilderness reclamation. "Population estimates?" Takashi asked. "Difficult to be precise, but AI analysis suggests between 10 and 15 million, Kelari planet-wide," Zuria replied. "Concentrated in what were once human population centers." Eliana nodded slowly. "So they've settled in, made themselves at home. And how many of us are left?" Zuria's expression darkened. "Surface scans detect no significant human life signs. There may be isolated pockets of survivors in remote areas, but..." The implication hung heavy in the air. If any humans had survived the initial invasion, they had been unable to rebuild in significant numbers. "Then we're not just liberating Earth," Eliana said, her voice hardening. "We're avenging it." The Liberation Fleet's strategy had been refined over generations. First, they would neutralize the orbital defenses using quantum tunneling technology to appear without warning, just as the Kelari had done to Earth. Then, specialized EMP weapons would target Kelari communications and defense systems. Finally, ground forces would establish beachheads at strategic locations. What followed was not a battle but a reckoning. The Kelari, who had spent generations believing themselves the undisputed masters of Earth, never saw the attack coming. Quantum flashes erupted across Earth's orbit as the Liberation Fleet materialized around the planet. The few Kelari ships in orbit were destroyed before they could even power up their weapons. "First phase complete," Takashi reported calmly. "All orbital threats neutralized. No casualties on our side." Eliana nodded, controlling her emotions with military discipline. "Begin Phase 2. The EMP weapons deployed with devastating efficiency across what had once been Earth's major cities, now transformed into alien architectural marvels suited to Kelari biology. Lights flickered and died. Defense systems went offline. Communication networks fell silent. Ground forces deploying," Zuria announced as drop ships streaked toward the surface. The Kelari, to their credit, rallied quickly. They were a warrior species, after all, one that had conquered multiple worlds before setting their sights on Earth. But they had grown complacent during their generations of unchallenged rule, and they had never faced humans who had spent 2 centuries preparing specifically to defeat them. Human ground forces, equipped with powered exoskeletons adapted to Earth's lighter gravity, moved through the Kilauea settlements with ruthless efficiency. Their weapons, designed to penetrate Kilauea bioarmor, cut through the alien defenders. Each soldier carried not just the training of Novus Prime's military academies, but the weight of ancestral memory. They fought not just for territory, but for redemption. "Commander," Zaria called out, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "We're detecting human life signs. Multiple locations, primarily in the mountain regions of what was once called the Himalayas, the Andes, and the Alps." Ileana's heart raced. Survivors. After all this time, it appears so. Organized communities. They're attempting to contact us on multiple frequencies. Against all odds, some humans had survived. Hidden in the most remote regions, they had endured generation after generation under Kilauea occupation, preserving their identity, their history, and their hope that they were not alone in the universe. The communication, when it came through, was in a dialect of English that had evolved over 2 centuries of isolation, but it was unmistakably human. "This is Sierra Colony to unidentified vessels. If you are human, as the orbital activity suggests, know that we still stand. We number nearly 40,000 across all sanctuary settlements. We have maintained records, preserved knowledge. We have waited for this day." Tears filled Ileana's eyes as she responded. "This is Commander Ileana Reyes of the United Earth Ship Vengeance. We have returned. Earth will be human again." The war for Earth lasted 3 months. The Kilauea fought desperately, activating hidden weapons platforms and calling for reinforcements from their empire. But the quantum interdiction fields deployed by the Liberation Fleet prevented any Kilauea ships from tunneling into the system, while the ground war steadily pushed the aliens back. In what had once been the plains of Africa, the final battle took place. The Kilauea Supreme Commander, a towering figure in ceremonial battle armor, faced Ileana Reyes across a field strewn with the debris of war. "You were supposed to be extinct," the alien said in its guttural approximation of human language. "How is this possible?" "You thought you destroyed humanity," Ileana replied. "But you only scattered the seeds, and now the harvest has come." The surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The Kilauea, reduced to less than 1 million survivors, were permitted to depart Earth on condition that knowledge of its location be erased from their navigational records, and that they would never return. As the last Kilauea ships disappeared into the darkness of space, humanity began the long process of reclaiming their world. The survivors from the hidden colonies emerged to join their long-lost cousins from Novus Prime. Earth's ecosystem, though altered by 2 centuries of alien influence, began to be restored with genetic material preserved from the Exodus. In New Haven on Novus Prime, they dismantled the Hall of Remembrance. Its purpose had been fulfilled. In its place, they built a spaceport, a gateway for the regular travel that would now connect humanity's 2 worlds. And on Earth, in the newly rebuilt United Nations Plaza, they erected a simple monument, a holographic display showing Admiral Helena Reyes watching Earth recede from the viewport of the Prometheus, alongside the words that had sustained humanity through its darkest hours. "We will return." They had kept that promise. Earth was home again.